jump right in. I'm going to give you Stephanie, okay? Everybody good?
Woohoo! Hi, my name is Steph, and I am an alcoholic. I'm a lot of other things, too. I use a lot of cocaine, mostly with alcohol. But I am an alcoholic. If you put both in front of me, I'm only going to go into the cocaine later so I can keep drinking the way I want to drink. I really love the preamble. I think that is like the perfect start. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. I wish I had heard that more clearly when I first came in, because I had all these preconceptions about AA, that you had to believe in God. I was worried about, cult-like stuff, and it's got nothing to do with that. I mean, there's a spiritual element, but for me, it was super important to understand that the only requirement for membership was a desire to stop drinking, and that really, in the end, to stay sober, once I got through the steps, all I had to do was give it back, was help another alcoholic, was become a sponsor. And the rest is wonderful and extra. It's gravy, but it's not the program. Desire to stop drinking, help another alcoholic. And that's super meaningful to me as someone who's not a theist or a believer in God. I have a spiritual life. I meditate. I practice. But I just want to put that out there. Remember that as you leave. Just come, right? Don't worry about anything else. Just come. So my story, it's not that exciting. I was adopted when I was 6 weeks old by people who still live in Manhattan. Born in Trenton, New Jersey. Adopted, grew up on the Upper East Side in Manhattan. Super, super waspy father, like vineyard vines, navy pants with red lobsters on them, that kind of stuff. He drank his feelings, like you don't talk. He was much older than my mother, born in 1924, so like depression, but sort of fancy life still. And in his house, and like most wasps, I think to this day, you don't talk about your feelings. There's nothing on the surface. You drink them. And he wasn't an alcoholic, but he certainly didn't discuss feelings with me of his own or mine. There was a lot of heavy drinking in my house. My mom is Australian, and she had moved to New York. They met, adopted me. My father was already 54. There was a lot of partying, a lot of drinking in my house. I learned from a very young age I was really uncomfortable. But I didn't understand that till I got sober and I looked back at my story. And we used to go to this really fancy, summer beach club in the Hamptons, and I hated it. I hated it. I would just, want to hide out in the locker. I didn't want to play with the other kids. And I wasn't, a nerdy kid, but I felt like less than all these little kids like Bo and Blair with blonde hair and skinny, and they all looked perfect. And I mean, I wasn't unattractive, but I just didn't feel like I was one of them. And we used to go to this play group where we all had to, our parents would stay on the beach and drink, and we would go to this fancy house for this play group, La Manger's play group. And I refused to go on the beach walks or learn to swim in the ocean because I didn't feel like I could. I was terrified. And I would sit in Lala Manger's house with her mother and eat. So my very first addiction and my very first self-soothing was food, which I hear in a lot of women's stories. So anyway, none of this is my parents drinking, the many mistakes they made, for which I've now forgiven and I understand. None of it is the reason I'm an alcoholic. This feeling was in me long before, this discomfort, this anxiety, this sort of terror of other people and not fitting in and constantly thinking people were talking about me and judging me. Meanwhile, they're not. We're all thinking about our own lives and our own shit day to day. But that was young. It just would go on. The script in my head was really bad from a really young age. So by 8 years old, I was stealing money from my parents to buy food, and I would binge eat in secret in my house. Hide the wrappers down the side of the bed, that kind of thing. Mom would come in, sort of have a fit, but it wouldn't really go anywhere. They sent me to therapy, medicated me young because I was angry by 9 or 10 years old. They weren't around a lot. I guess a latchkey kid. I didn't feel like I fit in my prep school, so I started really rebelling there. Again, all the girls were these perfect little blonde, little teeny little things, and I just wasn't one of them, at least in my head. So I guess by 13, I kept stealing money, and by 13 I was stealing money and hanging out with some guys who had nothing to do with my prep school. They hung out, I don't know if you know the city at all, but they hung out on 135th and Lenox, and I hung out there with them, and I would, steal money to buy 40s. I think my first drunk was 2 40s of Old E and something called Cisco, which is like liquid crack. Really bad, really sweet, bad. They called it liquid crack. I would tend to agree. Rolling blunts. I'm not really a pot person, but I could roll a good one. But that was kind of my life for like most of high school. And I was angry. I was angry because I felt so uncomfortable, and I was, I thought I wanted to kill myself, but could never go through with it. And I was angry. I was really angry. But a big part of it was anxiety, like social anxiety, and feeling like I didn't belong, and feeling like I wasn't good enough, and thinking everybody was thinking about me all the time. Like, how self-centered is that? Even though it's like I'm depressed, I'm still thinking about myself all the time and thinking everyone else is thinking about me. Anyway, so I'm kind of a weekend warrior through most of high school. Later in high school, I find a way to fit in with the pretty prep school girls. And I think it's then that I say in my story that I kind of become a chameleon. And, I can wind my way around. So when I'm up on 135th and Lenox, I'm actually walking like an OG. Like, I'm living the prep school world. But I'm doing that, and then I could, change my clothes. Literally go from my baggy Gerbeau jeans and my crushed bamboo earrings, switch it up to a cute little skirt, and, put my hair down and be at one of the Upper East Side bars. College was when I started drinking way more heavily. I went to a college far too easy for me on purpose. It was near the city, so I could be near my cocaine dealer because I was worried I wouldn't find one in college. There were plenty. This was also the beginning of meth, kind of, so if I couldn't get cocaine, I could buy, we called it glass then, on campus. But mostly I skipped classes. I don't know how I really graduated, and I graduated with pretty good marks. But yeah, it was most nights, and the blackouts started in college, and the other sort of shameful behavior, engaging in the things that, a woman of dignity and grace doesn't really want to engage in. We don't need to go further with that explanation. So the end of college, my father dies. I'm 20, and I use that as an excuse to go harder. It's not a real reason to go harder. It's just a painful life event, right? Like, I'm going to miss him. But for me, it's sort of the crossing over point. And I graduate, and that's when daily drinking starts for the first time. So I'm drinking at lunch every day. My boss is an alcoholic. We go have liquid lunches every day at a place around the corner from my job. And then very quickly, that wasn't sustainable. So I would come back in the afternoon from our liquid lunch with Mountain Dew and vodka. Seemed like a good mix, like Red Bull. We didn't have Red Bull yet. And I would drink that to sort of keep even through the rest of the day. And then I would drink all night every night. My alcoholic boss would go home, and I would keep going. And that's when cocaine came even more heavily into my story, because it helped the blackouts. And the blackouts were getting bad. I was, waking up on 2nd Avenue with my shoes in my hands, not knowing what person's apartment I had come from. It was bad. Like, when I remember it now, like, that's what keeps me sober sometimes. Like, just that feeling of shame, that feeling of self-loathing. So things aren't going well. My life's a disaster. I'm getting fatter and fatter. Everything's a mess. I hate my job. I'm drinking all the time. And I think that the best solution, obviously, is to find a man. So I find a boyfriend. I take him hostage. He is not a drinker. He has a shandy. I don't know if anyone knows what a shandy is. It's half lemonade and half like a light beer. And he could nurse one of those all night. So he seemed perfect. He would fix me. He didn't fix me. He would go home at 11, sick and tired of my shenanigans. And then I would continue going out. So I thought, he's Scottish. Why don't we go to Scotland? That'll fix everything. Nobody drinks there. So they do. They drink there. It's a little different schedule because the bars close at midnight. But the supermarkets, which, I mean, they close early, but all the liquor's there. So you can go get your dinner and all your liquor for the night. And so we moved to Scotland. I'm like, this is a fresh start. Everything's going to be fine. It does stop the daily drinking. It just moves to nightly. But there's no during the day. I've got a long commute. Get home, I'm going to have a bottle of wine. And then 9:30 rolls around. I've had my bottle of wine at home alone. Well, with him, but alone, right? And it's 9:30, the supermarket's going to close, and I am running across the Scottish moors to get to the supermarket to buy 2 more. Because every night I would tell myself, you're just going to have 1 bottle tonight. Like, by the way, normal people are like, I'm just going to have a glass of wine tonight. I'm like, I'm going to limit it to 1 bottle. I'm doing good. And then, it ends up free. I basically black out every night. I don't have access to cocaine there, so, I pass out. Wake up, do it all again. A year passes, nothing's changed, everything's miserable. I'm still acting out in ways that are not fair to my boyfriend. He hasn't fixed me, the place hasn't fixed me, so I leave. I leave him there with his horrible family, because, I'm nice like that. Like, I'm just like, ghost, and I leave. So I leave him in Scotland, and I come back, I'm like, the first night back, everything's going to be fine. Fresh start, love it, fantastic. First night back, I drank until blackout, completely till blackout. I woke up the next morning with one of those hangovers that is so, it's alcohol poisoning, right? Like they say, if I felt that way now, I would take myself to the ER. Every pore on my body is like the size of a nostril. And it's like, it's not real sweat coming out. It's kind of like a dry, itchy, everything's like, it's bad. And I'm really fat then, and I can't move, and it's summer. It's like the war, like literally, I was like, I can't do it. Years before, I'd been in therapy on and off for my whole life, thinking that would solve my problem. Never did. And a shrink had given me a book called The Power of Now, Eckhart Tolle, and a copy of Living Sober. And at the time, I was like, I don't know why he's giving this to me, and I just stopped seeing him. It seemed like too much. But they were there on the shelf in my room, and they were the one thing I looked at in my room that day. Now, I had grown up in a time when it was sort of chic to be a drug addict. Like things like Requiem for a Dream and the Basketball Diaries were like very cool. But it also led me to believe that being a recovered alcoholic and drug addict was also chic. Like I could play this cool. And so because I didn't have the like old man in trench coats idea of recovery in my head, that day when I saw those books, I was like, I can do this. And I picked up the phone and I called AA Intergroup in New York City. And she said, well, there's a meeting at the 79th Street Workshop today at noon. And I was like, absolutely not. Like, I can't move. There's no meeting. But she said, there's one tomorrow, too, at 12 o'clock. And I went to that one, and I raised my hand. And for the first time in my life, even if I'd known it in the back of my head, I said, I'm an alcoholic. My name is Stephanie, and I'm an alcoholic. And I cried, and the woman in front of me held me. And I stayed for 4 years. I did fuck all. I didn't do the steps. I had a sponsor who'd relapsed a couple of times. She didn't ask me to do the steps. My kind of game. I don't have to do anything. But man, I stayed angry. Like, I was the dry drunk. Like, people wanted me to drink again because I was so miserable. I wasn't doing anything to better the inside of here. And the script was still going. The self-loathing, the shame, other behaviors were still, heavy. The food came back. Like, I wasn't really doing anything. And when I raised my hand, it was to share about anger and hatred and no solution and nothing else. Pour me, pour me, pour me. And then, they say, pour me a drink. I don't like that stuff, but it kind of happened that way. So I did nothing. Surprise, surprise. After 4 years, I picked up. And I took a week off work when I picked up so I could stay home and drink the way I'd wanted to drink for those 4 years. And I changed my drinking. It was almost as if I'd learned how to drink better. So I wasn't a daily drinker anymore. I became a binge drinker. That seemed more sustainable in my life. I could keep my job, all kinds of things. I could keep my apartment. Like, it worked in a way that daily drinking didn't. So the binging, took off, and it started Thursday nights. Like, that was the new Friday. Fridays didn't seem to matter. I could drink all night Thursday, then all day Friday into Saturday, and then recover Sunday. Cocaine, of course, is in the picture at this point, so I can do 72 hours straight. Some grandiosity comes into my story here because I own an apartment that my mother bought me, but I lie to people and tell them I bought it. And I take out a mortgage on the apartment that I didn't buy, and I do it under the sort of disguise of paying off credit card debt, which was $50,000. It was hefty. But for the $50,000 credit card debt, I take out a $250,000 loan because clearly I need an extra $200,000 to show off. And I spend all $250,000 plus another $50,000 in credit card debt in 1 year just showing off. Like literally buying, not just buying drinks for the bar, not just buying loads of blow. I take about $50,000 of it. And it's like I think these things are going to cover up how miserable I am. Like if I have all the outside stuff, if I've got the fancy clothes and the bags and the house I rent in Southampton, I don't even know how to drive, so I rent a house in Southampton for the summer. I take car services out to the house most weekends. I insist on Mercedes car services to take me to and from so I can take my friends and show off all the money I have, none of which is mine, and none of which can really ever be paid back in real terms unless I sell the apartment. So I do, this is sort of the end of my drinking, right? This is but I don't see my life as unmanageable. I am making deals with the guy who sells cat food in my neighborhood, like taking out cat food basically on a loan because I can't afford to pay him because I'm spending all my money on things like houses in Southampton, but I don't see it. I don't see the crazy. I don't see the unmanageability. What I do see is I invite a man into my life who is also an alcoholic, but who it turns out, I've known a long time, as a friend who it turns out is very abusive. And he, physically, yes, the torturous part was the mental, the gaslighting, the insanity, making me feel insane. I have to be grateful to him, though, because at the end of my drinking, my life became, I couldn't see the unmanageability, but it became unbearable. It became unbearable. And I understood that the only way out of the relationship, because thankfully I had had AA in my life before, was to get sober. So I get sober long enough to kick him out. And I'm counting days, but I'm not raising my hand. I kick him out. I'm in and out. I'm in 30 days, go for a binge. In 20 days, binge, right? I'm not raising my hand in meetings because still in my head I think a man can fix my problems. So I think the good guys won't hit on a newcomer. So if I don't let them know I'm a day counter, I will find a man who will save me. So this is like the crazy thinking. I spend a year in and out, probably more of it in, counting days, but not in. I don't have a sponsor. I'm not helping anybody. I'm certainly not doing anything for myself. I quit smoking in that time. I lose a ton of weight, which actually doesn't really help because now I want to party and show off like how gorgeous I am. It was a mess. My last night was no different from any other night. I went out, I engaged in really, really bad behavior that, I'm glad I had the cocaine. I'm glad I can remember it. Like that unbearable feeling of shame. I had no mirrors in my house anymore. I couldn't even look at myself, and this was after I'd sort of made the outside transformation. I couldn't look at myself. The things I was doing to myself and to others was unbearable. And the script in my head was like, cars in the street just want to hit you. You're so disgusting and horrible. Everybody just wants to kill you. So I came back. I had this terrible night. I had one of the hangovers, basically alcohol poisoning. And I was like, oh my God, I need to get sober. I literally can't. I'm contemplating killing myself. I'm thinking. And I was like, no. So I called an old sober friend and I said, I need help. And that's the big thing, right? I need help. To say that is bigger than to say I'm an alcoholic because that's really what we're here, right? We're here to say, I can't do this alone. I need help. And he said, sit tight, I'm going to bring over tomorrow. I'm going to bring over Antabuse, and we'll get you sort of back in fighting shape. I didn't go to meetings again for like 2 months. I lived on fear of ever feeling that way again and abuse. And then I went back, and I don't remember the first meeting, but I immediately found a sponsor, a woman who I had hated my first time, because she was serious. She had things like, oh, you have to read the book. Oh, you have to maybe do a step. You have to call me every morning at 7:30. Like, these seemed like big, oh my God, what an ask, right? But that was it. I had to go to a meeting, call her, and then after 90 days, we would start reading the book. But it felt like a big ask. But I chose her. I knew that to save my life, I needed to change everything. And I couldn't change everything on my own. But I could with the support of others, right? Walking into a room where everybody wants the same thing for you and they are there to help, that is a power greater than me. Like, even when I think about that, I get shivers to this day. Like, this is powerful. This is it, right? Just the people sitting there saying, I'll help you. And I won't make you feel judged. I won't make you feel belittled or less than. I will help you turn your shame around. And that is exactly what she did for me. And we did it slowly. I needed the rigidity. You know, I hear people saying, like, getting sober is really hard. And I think for me it was about reframing the word hard. Is it really hard, or is it just uncomfortable? And once I got into my head that it was actually just uncomfortable, and with help, I could get past that discomfort and ultimately find comfort. If I keep saying, and people say to me like, oh, it's the hardest thing in the world to do, why the hell am I going to want to do it, you know? The truth is, it's not the hardest thing in the world. It wasn't for me, at least. It ended up being really uncomfortable, but not forever. And because I did the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I had the support of people, and I had someone who took me through the steps in a real way. She didn't force me to believe in anything she believed, right? She just asked me to humble myself and to admit that I alone could not do this, and I alone could not do this. She took me through the steps, not fast, not slow, you know, each to his own. We worked out a timeline that worked for us. But I needed to do them because I needed to feel like, whether or not I believed fully in every part of my soul and felt fulfilled, I needed to build a foundation. And that's what the steps did for me. They gave me the foundation to walk into a better life. Like, now I had the opportunity to walk into a better life. And they took away a lot of the discomfort. Later, a good psychiatrist and some good Zoloft took care of the rest of the problem. Because guess what? Like, I have a mental disability. Like, I need meds. I don't just need AA. It is my primary tool for staying sober, but I need a lot of tools. This is a big battle. So you use what's given to you. There's so much more available to you guys now. Take advantage of it. Like, there's a whole toolkit outside of AA. And so it turned out it wasn't enough. I was happy, but I was still filled with anxiety, riddled with anxiety, and alcohol had medicated that for me a long time. I couldn't see that till I cleared up the fog, and then I could go to a psychiatrist and say, honestly, here's what I'm feeling, and let's talk about what I need. And with AA and the right meds, man, I can't tell you. Happy, joyous, and free. I hate that. Like, I'm happy most of the time. But happy for me is living in the 4 to 6. It's not like 10, right? But I'm almost never to 1 anymore, unless it's a big traumatic event. Happy for me is like 4 to 6. Like, everything's okay. There's no drama. I'm just content. I'm not causing anybody pain, and mostly because I'm a kind and dignified person in the world, they're kind back, right? Like, it's a give and take. But it's not hard, and it quickly got easier. I have a fantastic life, even being married to the giant Japanese toddler. Even with that working against me. He's wonderful. Even with that, like, things are good. They're not fantastic. I've got a job. I've got a nice house. I've got the outside stuff. But what I also have are mirrors. That's amazing. Like, I can look in them. I kind of like it sometimes. And I don't have that script in my head anymore. I don't hate myself. I don't think cars on the street want to hit me. right? That's like, I'm like, oh, maybe some people think I'm attractive. Or maybe nobody's thinking about me at all, which is just as wonderful. But yeah, I mean, that's it. Peace for me, freedom is happiness. And that's what I found in the rooms of AA. So thank you all for listening to me.